So my next topic, ladies and gentlemen, is about the quiet revival. And again, I want to invite you just to move in a bit. There's no point me shouting, there's only you guys here, so I might as well just talk to you. So my next topic is about the quiet revival. There's been a research papers released by the Bible Society since 2018 to 2024 showing that Christianity is undergoing a quiet revival. That more people are going to church in certain demographics in 2024 than there was in 2018. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just recently, just yesterday in fact, Len Scrivener of Speak Life did a conference on that topic about the quiet revival and about the church's response. Glenn Scrivener, who's got a YouTube channel called Speak Life, I encourage you to subscribe, has also released a course called 321, which is a course introducing Christianity to people, which I encourage you to use. Held this conference, but I'm afraid to say that the speakers, I feel, flopped in answering the question about what as Christians we can do about this quiet revival. And so I'm going to give my own answer that came from yesterday when I was in attendance at the conference. But the first thing I want to point out is that there seems to be no urgency amongst Christian churches about the fact that we have this leave it there, bro, please, about the fact that we have this opportunity right now, that there is this koinonia moment, of people showing interest in Christianity. That actually, ladies and gentlemen, most of our churches are either unaware of it, don't care, or are not trying to rise to the occasion. How many of your churches have even spoke about it? Has your church brother? Has your church sister? Has your church brother? One. Has your church? Has your church? So out of 4 Christians, only one person's church has even mentioned it. That's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. We need to recognize that this Christian revival that is happening in France and in Britain, the sparks of this revival, they're not going to be here forever. We're counting in months, not years. The paper was released in 2024, which means we're already 12 months in. We're counting in months, not years. The church must seize the moment. So please, if you hear this, watch this video, share it with your pastor. But here's what the churches must do. They must double down on hospitality. Feel free to come in, guys, so that you're not crowding at the back. Come right in, use this space, guys, please, so that it makes space at the back for people to come in. So, as Christians, we must emphasize the importance of hospitality. Hospitality has to be central to Christian culture. How many times have you gone into a church and no one has spoke to you? How many times have you gone into a church and people look at you like they don't know what to do with you? We must rediscover human warmth. We must rediscover as Christians the practice of engagement and welcoming the stranger, the newcomer. Hospitality in the Bible is precisely the opposite of xenophobia. Xenophobia is the fear of the foreigner, fear of the stranger. Christianity esteems hospitality. To be a Christian leader, you have to be known for your hospitality. Abraham, our father in faith, was giving hospitality to God himself when he met him at the tree. Hospitality means that we must welcome the men that are coming into the church. We must welcome masculinity. that they are bringing. Men must not come into the church and feel that men are not welcome. How can you make men welcome in church? You make men welcome in church by giving church life expressions that are male, such as competitiveness, such as responsibility, such as challenge. These are things that men enjoy. Look where men congregate. They have all those characteristics. Football stadiums, sporting events, combat, politics. These are all the places where men engage out of interest. And so, as Christians, we must make sure that we bring men in and create a space for men by directing them to causes that they can engage with, actions that they can participate in, making it clear that the church has a side and that that side has opposition that we are against. And we must couch all of this within the code of chivalry so that we can disciple men in the practice of cause and action to be noble and brave and courageous. We have to welcome, ladies and gentlemen, that men express masculine energy. We mustn't put down the idea of strength. We mustn't constantly talk like everyone who walks into the church is an emotional cripple, that they're wounded and broken, but rather we must call them to nobility, to chivalry, to courage, to honor, to bravery, to fighting for a just cause, ladies and gentlemen. And we must, because a lot of these men that are coming into the church are intersecting with right-wing politics. Unfortunately, a lot of church leaders are naturally left-wing in their politics. They must practice hospitality by not creating an environment that alienates right-wing politics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the balance is that Christianity is not equivalent to right-wing politics. Christianity is not equivalent to left-wing politics. Christianity is not some smudge of both in the center. Christianity is a third way. It is a way of doing politics that is intrinsically Christian. And so whilst we must make a space that allows these right-wingers to come in the church and not be put off by overt liberal left-wing gibberish, we must nonetheless disciple them out of right-wing politics and towards a Christian politique. Now, any questions on that first point before I move on to my next point? Okay, I'll move on to my next point. The second important thing that Christians can do in response to the quiet revival of Christianity happening right now in France and America and England is to stress the importance of evangelism. How many of your churches employ either a full-time secretary or a full-time worship pastor? Put your hand up. You think so? How many of you? Yours? Okay. We got one. What, full-time?
Pastor and secretary.
Worship, pastor and secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, is there any biblical teaching that talks about worship pastors or talks about secretaries? No, there aren't. So why are we funding worship leaders and secretaries before we're funding full-time evangelists. Every one of your churches that can afford to support full-time or part-time a member of staff beyond the pastor, the priest, the next full-time or part-time position should be an evangelist. Because I guarantee if you value evangelism enough to fund full-time evangelism, so long as you employ the right person, man or woman, that evangelist will bring people into your churches. We must, ladies and gentlemen, take hold of the fact that all of us are called to evangelize by our Lord. The research shows that most of your friends will accept you praying for them, read the Bible with you, or come to church with you if you would only bother to ask or invite. So why haven't you? Why don't you list all your friends and systematically go through all of them, either, depending on your relationship and who they are, either inviting them to read the Bible you give them, come to church with you, or pray for them? Why don't you do that? Why don't you go out and take Christianity onto the street? I hear people complain all the time about Muslims protesting on the street. Well, what's stopping you from doing the same? Go out and do Christian processions. Go out and protest about Christian causes. Go out and celebrate Christian festivals in public. Live your faith in the public realm, ladies and gentlemen. And go out and evangelize. Don't be one of those annoying evangelists who stand on a street corner shouting at everybody. Set up a bookstall. Go and talk to people. Have conversations with people, ladies and gentlemen. Furthermore, the research shows that amongst these people who are giving Christianity a chance again in the UK, France and America, is what the researchers have called biblical fragility. In other words, they're engaging with the Bible, but they're challenged by what they're reading. This means, ladies and gentlemen, that teaching apologetics needs to become something that happens in every church as a regular part of church life to bolster the confidence of new and old believer alike. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, as Christians, we should organize ourselves as groups of Christians to deliberately work through all of our friends and all of our family in group evangelism to our friends and our family who are not Christian. It's called an evangelistic action plan. Every church invites the friends in that church to work as a team to evangelize the family and the friends of the people connected to the team members. That is a pattern of evangelism that will bear fruit. You befriend them, you listen to them, you engage with their ideas, and you show how Christianity is the better answer, and you engage them upon the Christian faith. Any questions on that point before I move on to my next point? Okay, the next point about what we can do in response to the quiet revival in the UK is to emphasize the importance of discipleship. That is of Christians training Christians in the Christian faith, ladies and gentlemen. I want to invite everybody to move this way. I'm going to stand that way. Ladies and gentlemen, please just film from the sides, guys. I want to be able to talk to people, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the importance of discipleship, it's the idea that we are engaging the new convert in the realities of the Christian faith. That means we're teaching them spiritual disciplines like regularity of prayer, regularity of fasting, regularity of giving alms to charity, regularity of self-examination, regularity of studying the faith, regularity of living in community, of practicing evangelism, of keeping their word, of practicing hospitality, of telling the truth. But it's also about engaging them with the sacraments, the sacrament of communion, the sacrament of baptism, the sacrament of confession, the sacrament of marriage, the sacrament of holy orders, the sacrament of anointing the sick. It's about engaging them with basic Christian practices. It's about instilling in them the love of martyrdom. Because if a Christian is willing to sacrifice for the cause of the church is already stronger. It's about getting them to buy into the faith. So helping them find a Christian wife or husband, helping them find a Christian landlord, helping them find a Christian employer. By integrating them into the community, they have bought into the community and they have grown, ladies and gentlemen. It's about instilling in them the idea that we are a people of the covenant, the new and everlasting covenant established by Jesus, and that this covenant is the source of our identity as Christians. That whatever we were before, that is not what we are now, and that we draw our identity from the new covenant. And that this makes us priests before God, who by a living sacrifice establishes God's kingdom here on earth, and that we work together and stand with one another as a holy nation. Any questions on the point of discipleship before I move on? Moving on then. The next thing that we can do as Christians in response to the quiet revival is we can rediscover and re-emphasize our identity as British people? No. Nigerians? No. Tutsis? No. Protestants? No. Catholics? No. As Christians, as the people of God, ladies and gentlemen, that particularly as men, that they have an identity as that priest that is codified in such like as the practice of chivalry, that they are to be a noble warrior, both a scholar of the faith and a defender of the faith, who rises up to advance his community, the church, the people of God, wherever he finds them gathered. That he is part of a universal or Catholic church that is not connected to any ethnicity, any language, any tribe, or any economic group, but rather is a universal group of human beings from all backgrounds brought into brotherhood as Christians. That he is part of an apostolic church that holds to an apostolic faith, that is connected to an apostolic succession of people who have gone back and maintained the teachings of the apostles from generation to generation, and that it is their responsibility to hand that on as an inheritance to the next generation, undefiled, undiluted, uncompromised. Any questions on this? The final aspect of their identity, while I remember, is that we are a church, that we are gathered together as the people of God to be holy before God, that it is a holy church whose aspiration is that each of us earn that title given to us as saint before God, as holy before God. We are declared holy and we are being made holy, and so we should become holy because our God is holy, and that our lives are to be lived for this purpose as Christians. Any questions before I go on to my final point? My final point about how we can respond to the quiet revival. Any questions? Okay. Final point then is this. The research shows that those who are becoming Christians are gravitating to churches that are Catholic and Pentecostal. Now, when you look at a Pentecostal church and you look at a Catholic church, you can't immediately see what they've got in common. They don't look the same, they don't sound the same, though they do believe the same and they have the same values. But there is actually something that both the Pentecostal and the Catholic churches have in common, that the churches that are not benefiting from the growth do not have in common with the churches that are growing. And it is this, ladies and gentlemen. Pentecostal and Catholic churches emphasize the supernatural. They emphasize the mystery and the supernaturalness of our religion. They emphasize the mysteriousness of our religion. Whereas evangelical, Puritan, Calvinistic churches and liberal churches emphasize the rational elements of our faith. But think about where the converts are coming from. They're coming from a rationalistic society. If they are converting to Catholic and Pentecostal churches, they are saying that an overly rationalized view of the world is not feeding their souls, and that they're looking for something more than rationalism. So the church must rediscover the mystery and the supernatural aspects of our religion. I'm not against rationalism, I'm not against reason. But we cannot devalue the supernatural and mysterious nature of the Christian faith when that is what is feeding the souls of people who are soaked in rationalism. That means, ladies and gentlemen, we must reverse the disenchantment of the world, and we must re-enchant the world, that God can be discovered in your life and the world around you, And that means tapping into medieval forms of spirituality that connect everyday experiences with the supernatural presence of God. We must re-romanticize life and the world and connect that through scripture and sacrament, the experience of the living God, and working with the reality that God's Spirit moves amongst us. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, all of these points that I have mentioned can be captured by a singular narrative, that we treat the life of the church as a civilizational project to establish a new Christendom in the West. And that narrative serves as the vehicle both of evangelism and discipleship by which we can organize all of our efforts to maximize this koinonia moment of opportunity that the church is in right now, as the quiet revival is happening in England, France, and America, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions on that point, on the talk, ladies and gentlemen, about the quiet revival? Going to come here if guys want to move in a bit. Please come in, guys, come in. Okay, any questions going once? Can't hear you, bro.
I agree with what you're saying, and I only heard the ending of it. Yeah? Are you, and I'm a Christian, are you worried that maybe part of this spiritual revival, which is happening, will also lead to more pagan, belief systems that are not Christian at all? Because that's something like in my personal life, when I look at my friends and their friends, something that I can observe, and which I didn't observe a few years ago.
Yeah,
So
great question. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is, when you understand why the quiet revival is happening, you realize that the things that have led to the quiet revival do not mean that by necessity everybody becomes Christian. Because the things that led to the quiet revival have simply caused people to ask questions that our liberal secular society has not answered. That doesn't mean that they're discovering the church. And so yes, the same things that are leading to the quiet revival are also feeding the growth of Islam, are also feeding the growth of the New Age, are also feeding the growth of new paganisms and new heresies and old heresies. And that is why it is so important that the Christians get on the front foot and get out there and get active in response. Because just because people are engaging with these questions doesn't mean that they're engaging with Christianity on these questions. And it is our job as Christians to make sure that we are the most visible, loudest voice dealing with the questions that people are asking. The things that have caused the quiet revival are the following. Number one, the lockdown. You stripped away people's entertainments and they started asking deeper questions that sent their life tunneling down a rabbit hole. Number two, progressive overreach. When the trans ideology went after the kids and allied itself to paedophiles, lots of people were shocked and they reacted against it by swinging right. But then when they swung right, they had to justify their reasons. And as they began to search deeply to justify their reasons, they started exploring history and culture and tradition. And the more they did that, the more they discovered Christianity. And the tributaries of right-wing politics fed into the Christian church. The third reason, ladies and gentlemen, is because of the existential threat that many people are now realizing that Islam poses to Western civilization. And that has sent them looking for a counter. Well, the pagans are offering a counter. An ideology of blood and bodin, of blood and land. And the nationalists and the ethno-nationalists are offering a counter. If we Christians don't also offer a counter, we will be dismissed as irrelevant to the threat. And so as Christians, we must be loud and clear that we are the answer to the trans ideology. We are the answer to Islamization. And that we are the answer that doesn't involve climbing in bed with racists. Any other questions on the topic? Good question. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Sell the cloak now.
Guys, don't wait for the heckler. If you've got a question, going once.
Yeah.
Go on.
You haven't yet touched on the issue of new technologies, social media.
Yeah.
Like it or not, isn't the battlefield really, particularly for children, young teenagers, in terms of getting onto Instagram, TikTok, whatever? Because
Could I ask the cameras to move forward a bit?
a lot of younger people.
Not backwards, forwards, because you're pushing people back. Please. Go on.
So yeah, there's not the attention span that older people have.
Yeah.
So isn't that a critical battlefield?
Yes, absolutely. A brilliant question. One of the things actually that has driven where people have discovered their answers to their questions is social media, ladies and gentlemen. Social media is the place where public debate is occurring. As Christians, stop doing your evangelism on the street. If you want to do your evangelism, do it on social media. Because when was the last time any of you Christians had a question in your head and you thought to yourself, you know what I'll do? I'll just walk around the streets until I find an answer. You don't do that yourselves. So why do you think other people are doing it? When people want to find answers to questions, they are going onto the internet, they're going onto social media. So that's where the church must be to do its evangelism. Excellent question, excellent point. Next question. Going once?
Well, figures are demonstrating that abortion rates are 48 out of 100 live births in the UK. What must we do as Christians to combat abortion rates?
Right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's be clear. There are a number of churches that aren't talking about evangelism. Sorry, aren't talking about abortion. St. Helens Bishopgate, you won't talk about abortion from the pulpit. All Souls Church, you won't talk about abortion from the pulpit. Hagia Sophia Orthodox Cathedral, you won't join the pro-life march that occurs in London. Churches should be at the forefront of the fight against abortion. If you don't talk about it, it doesn't mean that your congregation won't be learning about it, but they will just learn about it from non-Christians. As Christians, abortion should be absolutely anathema in the church culture. And we must fight against the abortion industry and try to bring it down, copying and following the example of the successful Christian militancy in America who have and are destroying the abortion industry. We should adopt their strategies, bring them to the UK and use them to delegitimize, delegalize, defund and de-invest from the abortion industry. That's what the church must be doing. And we can't do that by not getting political, by not organising culturally, and by not organising socially, ladies and gentlemen. Any other questions on the topic?
Other than evangelism, what other forms can we use to keep the revival going? What
Right.
are the top ones you recommend?
The brother obviously wasn't here at the beginning, so I'll just go through them again. The church must rediscover and practice hospitality. The church must rediscover and practice evangelism. The church must rediscover and practice discipleship. The church must rediscover and practice, bear with us. What was it? Discipleship, evangelism. Let me just get it out.
Hospitality?
No, I already said that one. The church needs to rediscover the importance of mystery. Those are the things that the church must do in response. And this is basically because when I went to Glenn Strivener's conference yesterday, I didn't feel that the speakers really gave good answers to the question of what we should do. Any other questions on the topic of the quiet revival? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, going once, going twice.
Who is Jesus?
It's not the topic of the quiet revival, but Jesus is God, the Messiah of Israel.
Amen.
That's who Jesus is. Any other questions about any aspect of the Christian faith then? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. If anybody wants to join me for a cup of tea, I'm going to go grab a cup of tea. You're more than welcome to come with me.